My name is Clara, I'm 35, and I discovered my husband was going to sleep with his mistress at a luxury hotel, so I booked the room next door and brought her husband with me. Before I tell you about how this single night of betrayal led to me taking down my entire family's business empire, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It started, as so many modern tragedies do, with a notification on a tablet. It was a Tuesday night. I was sketching out a floor plan on the couch, and Mark, my husband of 10 years, was supposedly at a late-night client dinner. Our shared tablet, the one we used for recipes and booking vacations, lit up on the coffee table. A calendar reminder. My heart did a little flip. Maybe he'd planned a surprise for our upcoming anniversary. I picked it up, a small smile on my face. The smile froze and shattered. It was a reservation confirmation from the Grand Elysian, the most opulent, ridiculously expensive hotel downtown. For tonight. The package name felt like a punch to the gut, Couples Getaway. I scanned the details, my blood running cold. Dinner reservation for 2 at their Michelin-starred restaurant. A bottle of champagne on arrival. And then I saw the guest list. Mark's name was there, of course. And next to it, the name of the second guest, Isabella. Isabella. His junior colleague. The bubbly, overly friendly woman who had been to our home for dinner 3 times. The one who had complimented my cooking and told me how lucky I was to have a man like Mark. The first wave was shock, a physical jolt that left me breathless. But the tears I expected never came. Instead, a strange, cold calm washed over me. It was like a circuit breaker had flipped in my soul. 10 years of marriage, a life I thought was perfect, revealed as a lie in a single notification. I wasn't sad. I was done. This story wasn't going to be about my heartbreak. It was going to be about my response. This would not be the end of my story, but the start of a new one, written on my own terms. My fingers, steady and precise, typed Isabella's name into a social media search bar. Her profile was public, of course. Full of smiling photos with her husband, listed proudly as David. A quick professional search gave me his last name and his company. He was a financial analyst. He looked kind in his photo, with warm eyes and a slightly goofy grin. My heart ached for him. He had no idea. Taking a deep breath, I sent him a message. No emotion, just facts. David, my name is Clara. I am Mark's wife. I have reason to believe our spouses are meeting at the Grand Elysian tonight. I have the reservation details. I am going there, and I thought you might want to join me. I attached a screenshot of the hotel confirmation. He called me within 3 minutes. His voice was shaky, cracking with disbelief and a pain I knew intimately. Is this real? I wish it wasn't, I said, my own voice flat and even. Meet me at the coffee shop across the street from the hotel in an hour. He agreed. We were 2 strangers, about to be united by the worst kind of bond. Seeing my reflection in the coffee shop window, I almost didn't recognize myself. The woman staring back wasn't the accommodating, quiet wife. Her eyes were hard. For my entire life, I had been the ghost architect at my family's prestigious firm, Richard Architects. It was my father's company, but my older sister, Evelyn, was the star. She was the face, the one who took the meetings and accepted the awards. I was the quiet engine, the one who actually did the work. I'd sketch out brilliant designs, solve impossible structural problems, and then watch Evelyn present them as her own. We're a team, Clara, my father would say, patting my shoulder. What's good for the firm is good for the family. My groundbreaking thesis in college, an award-winning paper on sustainable urban sanctuaries mentored by the legendary Professor Albright, was the foundation for our firm's most profitable green projects. Yet, my name was on none of them. My promotion to a senior partner position was always just around the corner. My salary was a fraction of my sister's. I was told to be patient, to be a team player. I swallowed my frustration for the sake of peace, for the sake of a family that I now realized saw me as a resource, not a daughter. David arrived, looking ashen. He was taller than I expected, and his kind eyes were now filled with a storm of confusion and hurt. I didn't need to say much. I just pushed my tablet across the table. He scrolled through the email, his hand trembling. "We just celebrated our 5th anniversary," he whispered, his voice raw. "We've been trying for a baby." A wave of fury, pure and hot, washed through me. This wasn't just cheating, it was a profound violation of lives and futures. "What are we going to do?" he asked, looking at me, desperate for a plan. The old Clara would have cried. She would have gone home and waited for Mark to return, ready to have a screaming match or a tearful confrontation. The new Clara looked at the grand entrance of the Grand Elysian across the street, a cold fire burning in her chest. "I'm not going to be a victim waiting at home," I said, my voice low and steady. I pulled out my phone. "I'm going to be a guest." David watched, confused, as I dialed the hotel. "Hi," I said to the concierge, my voice sweet as honey. "I'd like to book a room for tonight. As close as possible to the reservation under the name Mark Evans. In fact, if the adjoining room is available, I'll take it." There was a pause on the other end, then a flurry of typing. "Yes, ma'am. The adjoining suite is available." "Perfect," I said. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung up and looked at David. A flicker of understanding, then admiration, sparked in his eyes. "You're not serious." "Oh, I'm dead serious," I said. "And you're coming with me." At that moment, I thought exposing the affair was the main event. I had no idea it was just the opening act for a much larger war. Checking into the Grand Elysian felt surreal. David and I stood in the marble-floored lobby, two silent allies in an undeclared war. The bellhop led us to our suite, and the moment the door clicked shut behind him, the tension became unbearable. The connecting door to their room was right there, a thin barrier of wood and paint separating our reality from their fantasy. We didn't speak. We just listened. Soon, we heard it. Muffled laughter from the other side. Isabella's high-pitched giggle, a sound I now despised. Then Mark's deeper laugh, the one he used when he was trying to be charming. The clinking of champagne glasses. The faint, cheesy melody of a romantic song. Every sound was a fresh stab of betrayal. David sank onto the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. I stood by the window, staring at the city lights, my hands clenched into fists. We were drowning in their happiness. For 2 hours, we sat in that silent, shared hell. The pain was immense, but it was also clarifying. It burned away all the illusions, all the excuses I had made for Mark, for my family, for years. The disrespect for Mark wasn't a standalone issue. It was a reflection of the disrespect I had accepted my whole life. I had allowed myself to become invisible. Around 10 p.m., the sounds from the next room quieted down. The music stopped. There was a stretch of silence that felt heavier and more suffocating than the noise. This was it. The moment of truth. I walked over to the hotel phone, my steps feeling strangely light. I picked up the receiver and dialed the 4 digits for the room next door. David looked up, his eyes wide. The phone rang once. Twice. Then, his voice. Relaxed, happy, and disgustingly content. "Hello?" I let a beat of silence hang in the air before I spoke, my voice steady, clear, and sweet as poison. "Hi, honey. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." The silence that followed was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It stretched for an eternity. I could practically hear the blood draining from his face. Then, a panicked whisper. "Clara? How, what are you doing?" "Oh, I'm just next door," I said, a smile in my voice. "And I'm not alone. David, Isabella's husband, is here with me. We were just chatting about our spouses' workloads and thought, maybe we could all have a little chat together." The chaos that erupted on the other side of the door was exactly what I had orchestrated. There were frantic scrambling sounds, hushed, angry arguments. "You told me she was out of town." I heard Isabella shriek. How could you be so stupid? Mark hissed back. It was music to my ears. David and I shared a look. The pain was still there, but now it was mixed with something else, power. After 5 minutes, we walked to the adjoining door and knocked. It was a firm, solid knock that echoed in the hallway. The door creaked open. Mark stood there, his face a mess of sweat and panic, wearing only a hotel bathrobe. His eyes darted from my calm face to David's stoic expression. He looked behind him, at Isabella, who was trying to hide behind the king-sized bed, clutching a sheet to her chest. The look of utter shock and humiliation on their faces was a masterpiece of emotional devastation. Mark started to stammer, Clara, this isn't what it looks like. I almost laughed. Mark, it is exactly what it looks like. You, your mistress, her husband, and your wife, all in the same luxury hotel. It's almost poetic. He tried to pull me aside, to whisper, to beg. We can talk about this at home. Please. Let's not make a scene. I looked him dead in the eye. The man I had loved, the man I had built a life with, was a stranger. A weak, pathetic stranger. There is no home for us to talk in anymore, Mark, I said, my voice cutting through his panic. And you need to understand something. This, I gestured to the room, to Isabella, to the whole sordid mess, this is just a symptom. Now, I'm going to go cure the disease. He had no idea what I meant. But he would. They all would. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the doorway of his ruined evening, the first casualty in a war he didn't even know had begun. The next day, I packed a bag and left the house we had shared. I didn't take much. Just my clothes, my laptop, and my pride. I called a lawyer to start the divorce proceedings. Then, I made the phone call I was dreading. I called my parents. I expected comfort. I expected outrage on my behalf. What I got was a cold dose of family politics. You did what? My father, Richard, barked into the phone after I explained the hotel incident. You made a public scene? Clara, have you lost your mind? Think of the family's reputation. My mother, Eleanor, got on the extension. Honey, men make mistakes, she said in her placating tone. Mark is a good man. You can't just throw away 10 years of marriage over one indiscretion. You need to think about keeping the family together. I was floored. They weren't concerned about my pain. They were concerned about appearances. My sister Evelyn's upcoming wedding, the firm's annual charity gala, the pristine image of the perfect Richard family. My personal implosion was just an inconvenience to them. That was when the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. My husband's betrayal wasn't the disease. My family was. Their dismissal of my pain was the same dismissal they had shown my talent for years. I ended the call, my hands shaking not with sadness, but with rage. I moved into a soulless temporary apartment, surrounded by cardboard boxes that held the fragments of my former life. I felt utterly alone, adrift in a sea of betrayal. For a day, I let myself fall apart. I sat on the floor and stared at the wall, feeling the full weight of being a ghost in my own life. Then, I saw it. Tucked inside a box of old college memorabilia was my thesis. Sustainable Urban Sanctuaries. Bound in dark blue leather, with my name embossed in gold. It had won the university's highest award for architecture. I picked it up, the weight of it familiar in my hands. This was me. This was my work, my mind, my soul. Untouched and uncredited by anyone else. That night, fueled by coffee and a burning need to reclaim myself, I started digging. I saw an article online announcing a massive new project downtown, the Harrison Tower. The Harrison Corporation was looking for a landmark design, something iconic, with a heavy emphasis on forward-thinking sustainable design. It was as if they had written the brief from my thesis. A name jumped out at me, CEO, Mr. Harrison. I did some more research. My blood buzzed. Mr. Harrison was on the advisory board for the architectural school at my alma mater. I found a photo of him from a few years back, giving the keynote speech at the retirement dinner for my mentor, Professor Albright. It wasn't luck. It wasn't a coincidence. It was an opportunity. A door had opened. My family, I knew, would be all over this project. And I knew exactly which designs they would use. My designs. The old Clara would have let them. The new Clara picked up the phone and started making a plan. I knew my family's playbook because I had written it. They would take my most innovative, eco-conscious designs from my old sketchbooks, the ones they'd dismissed as too academic years ago, and present them as their own fresh ideas for the Harrison Tower. They were banking on me being too broken by my divorce to fight back. They underestimated me. That was their first mistake. Instead of trying to stop them, I prepared for battle. I spent a week locked in my apartment, refining my original thesis designs, updating them with new technology and materials, creating a presentation that was not just a collection of drawings, but the story of a philosophy. It was the culmination of my entire professional life. Then I made my move. It was the boldest thing I had ever done. I found the direct email from Mr. Harrison's executive assistant. I composed a message that was professional, concise, and impossible to ignore. I introduced myself as an independent architect and a former student of Professor Albright. I mentioned my award-winning thesis on the very topic his project brief emphasized. I didn't mention my family or their firm. I simply stated that I had an alternative proposal that I believed aligned perfectly with his vision and respectfully requested 5 minutes of his time at the end of the primary presentations. I attached my thesis abstract and a letter of recommendation from the dean of the architectural school. I didn't expect a reply. But 24 hours later, I got one. A single line from his assistant, "Mr. Harrison has cleared 5 minutes for you. Be prepared." The day of the presentation, I walked into the Harrison Corporation's boardroom and sat in the back, an anonymous face in a sea of suits. My heart was pounding a rhythm against my ribs that was part terror, part exhilaration. My father and Evelyn were at the front, oozing confidence. They didn't even see me. To them, I was invisible. Evelyn started the presentation. And there they were. My designs. Rendered in glorious 3D, beautiful and vibrant on the massive screen. She spoke about them with a slick, practiced polish, but her words were hollow. She described the what, but she had no idea of the why. She called my integrated rainwater collection system a cost-saving feature instead of a core part of the building's symbiotic relationship with its environment. She moved to the grand finale. And our most revolutionary innovation, she announced, is a cross-ventilation system that creates natural cooling, drastically reducing the building's energy footprint. She finished to polite applause. Mr. Harrison, at the head of the table, looked thoughtful, but not impressed. He was about to speak when I stood up. "Mr. Harrison," I said, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the murmurs. Every head in the room turned to me. My father and sister stared, their faces a mask of pure shock. "My name is Clara Evans," I continued, walking to the front of the room. "And I believe the core philosophy of this design has been overlooked." His assistant gave me a subtle nod. My 5 minutes had begun. I plugged my USB drive into the laptop. My presentation filled the screen. It wasn't just images, it was the theory, the diagrams, the soul of the work. "The rainwater system isn't about saving costs," I began, my voice filled with a passion I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. "It's about creating a living building that breathes with the city's climate." I explained the philosophy, the intricate details Evelyn had missed. Then, I clicked to my final slide. It was a scanned image of the cover of my university thesis from over a decade ago. "Sustainable Urban Sanctuaries" by Clara Evans. And below it, a direct quote from the introduction, describing the revolutionary cross-ventilation system as the heart of the design. A collective gasp went through the room. It was silent. Utterly, devastatingly silent. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't accused anyone. I had simply presented the truth. The evidence was undeniable. I looked at my family. My father's face was pale, his confident smirk gone, replaced by a ghastly, slack-jawed horror. Evelyn was staring at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of hatred and panic. They had been exposed in the most public, professional way imaginable. Mr. Harrison stood up. He didn't look at them. He looked at me, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Ms. Evans," he said, his voice booming in the silent room. That was the presentation I was waiting for. He hadn't rescued me. I had rescued myself. And in doing so, I had just signed the death warrant for my family's legacy of lies. The meeting ended. The board members filed out, some casting disgusted looks at my father and Evelyn, others giving me nods of respect. My family cornered me in the hallway, their faces twisted with fury. "How could you?" my father hissed, his voice low and venomous. "How could you do this to your own family? After everything we've given you?" "Given me?" I replied, my voice dangerously calm. The fear was gone, replaced by a hard, clear certainty. "You gave me nothing. You took from me. You took my work, my voice, my confidence." I turned to Evelyn, who was sputtering, trying to form a defense. "You built your entire career on my back. Your fancy title, your high salary, your reputation, it was all mine. This will ruin us," my mother cried, appearing at my father's side. "The inheritance, the firm." I cut her off. "There is no us anymore. For years, you took my work and put your name on it. From now on, the only name on my work is mine. And the only name on my front door is mine." I took a step back, creating a physical distance that mirrored the emotional one. "We have nothing more to discuss. I suggest you find a good lawyer." I turned and walked away, not looking back. I could feel their eyes burning into me, but their heat couldn't touch me anymore. I was walking out of the shadows and into the light, and the feeling was breathtaking. The divorce from Mark was just paperwork. This was my declaration of independence. A year can change everything. I'm standing in my own office now. It's minimalist and bright, with a huge window overlooking the city. On the glass door, in clean, silver letters, it says Evans Design Studio. The Harrison Tower, now officially named the Evans Tower at Harrison Place, is under construction, a massive skeleton of steel and potential rising into the skyline. It's my project. My name. My legacy. My phone buzzes. It's a news alert. Richard Architects files for bankruptcy amid scandal. Apparently, after losing the Harrison contract and their reputation, key clients and talent left in droves. Their empire, built on my silent labor, had crumbled to dust. I don't feel joy, not exactly. Just a quiet, profound sense of justice. A balance restored. The door to my office opens and David walks in, holding 2 cups of coffee. After our respective divorces were finalized, we stayed friends. We were 2 survivors who had navigated the same shipwreck, and we had forged a bond built on mutual respect, not romance. It was the healthiest relationship I'd ever had. "How's the empire building going?" he asks with a warm smile. "It's a lot like architecture," I say, taking a sip of coffee. "You have to tear down the old, rotten structures before you can build something strong and true." He looks out the window at the rising tower. "Well," he says, "you're building one hell of a foundation." Later that day, I'm at the construction site. I put on my hard hat, my name printed neatly on the front, and walk through the bustling hive of activity. The air smells of sawdust and wet concrete, the smell of creation. I unroll a blueprint, the paper crisp and new in my hands. I look at the complex lines and angles, the intricate design that came from my mind. For so long, I believed my role was to be the silent support structure for everyone else's life. But I was wrong. I was always the architect. I just needed to fire my clients. I smile, a real, genuine smile that reaches my eyes. I roll up the blueprint, nod to the foreman, and walk toward the rising tower, my tower, ready to see my vision become a reality, brick by brick. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It's been a crazy journey, and I'm finally in a place of peace and strength. I'd love to hear from you all in the comments. Have you ever had a moment in your life where you had to completely tear everything down to rebuild something better? Let me know. And if my story resonated with you, please give this video a like and consider subscribing for more. I'll see you in the next one.